Core system login in progress. Access granted.
Alrighty, welcome back. We are now going to work on the Mesh Library. The Mesh Library will allow us in Blender to create models, just like this cube, export them to a wavefront object, or save them as a Blender object since Unity can import that, and read them into a library. Now, our initial library will not be serialized, but we can serialize this library with the binary writer and reader. Do not serialize it with the binary formatter, because that is now considered unsafe. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But right now, we are going to get into this. We need to create 2 new folders to start off with. Just so you know, with the editors, we have 12 files to create, but most of them are rather small, rather short, so no major worry. So the first folder will be called Editors. The second folder will be called Models. And that is where we will save our Blender files. Underneath scripts, we do need another folder also called Models. And I like to keep my editors separate, so I'm going to put another, under Editors, I'm going to put another folder called Models also. And that way we can keep them separate from everything else. Now we need a new scene, mainly because I don't like having this in the actual lab scene. So open up the scenes folder, right click inside, and go to create new scene and call it Models. Leave everything in here as is. We're not going to be running this. We're going to be saving it, creating a prefab with it. So no worries there. Right click in the hierarchy and create a empty game object. Reset the transform. Rename it Mesh Part. This will be our development mesh part, and we will have a mesh parts, a mesh shape, and a mesh shapes, and all the editors and windows to work with those. Plus we will have something called offsets, and we will have the actual mesh library node. Underneath scripts, models, right click and create a new script called mesh shape. Excuse me, mesh part. Select our mesh part game object and drag the mesh part script onto it, or click add component and add it. Double click on the mesh part to bring it up in the editor. Since this will be editor only, is the only time we'll be actually accessing most of this, we can go ahead and change our usings to use link, use Unity editor, and use Unity engine. We cannot build a production game with Unity editor in a mono behavior, but we will use a if statement when it comes to that to omit that, ignore that. We don't need the start and the update. We do need our neighbors, or our neighbor. Well, let's call it side. Using static common. We need a game object source. That's what we will drag from the models folder. What we'll export from Blender or save from Blender. for later on when we actually serialize, we'll need an index and parent because we're going to work a lot with indexes here. Material is just a preview material. That's too soon. Get rid of that one for right now. Each mesh part will be singular, meaning it will not have submeshes. So we only have a reason to have a single level array. And of course, Unity wouldn't allow a jagged array. We would have to actually wrap our jagged array in a struct. Okay. Right off the top of the barrel, we need something called available part, a struct. And this will be at the bottom of our file, but the available part is coming from Blender or from our model file, wherever you got your model file from. We'll be doing ours in Blender in here. And it is, these two are only for the editor. This field is exactly what it says. It's a mesh filter where we'll be getting our vertices. We can import multiple parts into multiple pieces into one part, but it's still going to be one part. It's not going to be a submesh item. So they'll be welded together into one part. Import is a method to weld two meshes together. So maybe you have brought in two different parts and now you've changed your mind and you want them to be one part. That's what import is. Yeah, I didn't declare it. Wish I wouldn't have started off with this one because we haven't actually created our part yet. But we will be going to it rather quickly. Vertices. I created another new word. Okay, max FI. Because we currently have or can have face indexes, and we are welding these two parts together into one. We need to know what the maximum face index is currently, +1. If there are no face indexes, then it'll be 0. I do not have the clone array. Let's jump over and add that. Oh, wait a minute. I should have that. Or it should be able to use the... Okay, that's fine. Let's jump over to our... I think I want to put that in math because we're going to clone. Array common is for common is generic. Yeah, I think this belongs in math. So jump over, open up the math extensions file, jump to the bottom and put a public static int clone array. Could make a generic version of this, but we're not. So in this case, we're not doing, we're not returning an array if it's, or we're not initializing the array if it's not, or if it is a null. We're creating our copy to array, and we're copying all our values over. We do this because an array is a reference, and if I change values in one array, I will change the values in the other. And I don't really want to do that. I want to have a new array of the same values. And I don't have that function either. I am just go back to math again. You can right click on clone array. We have a few new functions to add here, I guess. We'll call it addition. So we're adding whatever this value is to every member of this array. And the value we're adding is max fi. Held the shift key down too long. And like I said before, we are going to allow the usage of Blender's tangents. But we can also recalculate them here. And that either way it goes, we're not calculating them in the front end when we're building our terrain. And then after everything, if the import was not equal to null, I'm going to set it to null just to be a jerk to myself. But seriously, that's just a good practice. Okay. That will weld our two meshes together. We need a few functions here to actually create our mesh preview. We want to see what we import. And we want to also be able to clear our import, because we really don't want to keep them all around, since all of our previews are going to be basically in the same space and they'll be on top of each other. So I'm going to my Blender, or my model import now. Going to the target I'm going to the target we are creating. That will actually be our game object itself. The game object we is created in the front end. What's so wrong with you? Oh, I had it inside of the other function. That's what was going on. So if our mesh filter is null, we need to add one. This is where we're going to preview, not where we're getting it. Typing the same thing twice. Now we need to check our mesh renderer also. I tried to write this function where it could be copied and pasted to other classes that you might want to work with meshes. So although our material is at a member level, and our game object is our local game object, you can actually either turn this into a public static that could work, in which you call it from other mono behaviors to create meshes, or you can copy and paste it over to another mono behavior or another class. So bugs do happen. Blender's not perfect, so we do a check there that everything we got from Blender adds up. Now we are going to set our tangents here. I forgot to pass those in, didn't I? Yes, I did. Yeah, I like to put them last. red. I'm going to go ahead and type this here for you. And we will probably use this later on. But we're going to comment it out for now. Sometimes Unity is a better option to calculate the tangents than Blender. But we're going to go ahead and act like Blender is the best option. And we're going to put error messages down here if our information came in wrong from Blender, which I haven't had yet from Blender, but I have had from other models. So we need a method to just wipe everything out, clear everything. I used to have this in a non-mono behavior class, so this isn't really necessary inside of a mono behavior. You can just call destroy immediate, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for anybody that wants to experiment, just to remind you. That will get rid of our current preview. Now let's put two methods up here to call these two methods. First we'll do refresh mesh, and we're going to go ahead and make this multi-select. So if we have like 5 different mesh parts selected in the hierarchy view, if we have a bunch of different parts selected over here like that, we can refresh all of them at once. Refresh mesh. Another new word. Occasionally we need to refresh the mesh just for this guy. So just for this one mesh part, we need to force it. But otherwise, we're going through all game objects that are selected and trying to get a mesh part from them. And if we do get a mesh part from them, we'll create this game object. We'll create this mesh filter. And yeah, I want to destroy it first. I've tried to just refresh, and occasionally that doesn't work. That one's probably all on Unity. Okay, hold on. Else we're just doing this one. pass in this guy's game object. So that will be our refresh mesh. Now we need to put a method for other classes to call that will clear the mesh. Same logic as before. Boom. Okay. Now we need to go set up our editor. Go back to Unity. Oh, I didn't save my math file. There's all of our sides. Place for our material. The place for where we're going to get the mesh. And anything else. That's it. So we need to go up to Editors, Models, and add a new C# script called Mesh Part Editor. All right, I'm just going to copy my usings up here. Don't need you. Well, and custom editor. This is only good if you're. This only counts. Can edit multiple objects. Only counts when you're using the serializable object, which we are not. But I still put it up there because I forget it when I do use the serializable object. So and draw the default inspector simply means that we are going to draw exactly what we saw before, but we're going to put all of our controls above that. And we need to set our mesh part to the target, cast of the target. So above draw the default inspector, we need to put a few buttons. Refresh mesh. And I'm going to go ahead and put my button here. I only want this button to show if there's something set in the import item field, or the import field. So if that is empty over here in Unity, then I don't want that button to show. But if I drag something onto that, in fact, if I drag this onto that, if I drag this onto itself, it will actually show the button. Okay, most of our work takes place in a separate window, an editor window. So once again, in the editor's models, right click, add C# script and call it mesh part win. Change the mono behavior to an editor part window. Get rid of the start and the update. Add a mesh part for our mesh part so we don't have to constantly fetch it. And we need a vector 2 for a scroll bar. We need a way to show the window. I know UI Elements has some really cool ways to do this now. If you're into the Unity UI stuff, and I already knew some of it, but it's just too long. That would be a tutorial in itself for Unity. So I'm going to continue to use this as long as I can, because the UI Elements, they're very cool, very robust. But they also take a class to learn. Where these are very traditional. It's a very traditional style of coding that I think a lot of people are familiar with. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Say something in the comments. So we want to get our mesh part when we're enabled. And if we change selection in our window, we also want to get the mesh part. And if our mesh part is null, we want to tell ourselves. First, we want to try to get it again. Then we want to put a label here and say that select a mesh part. So here is a place for us to drag our model to. And we need to actually say this field returns a Unity object, so we have to cast it to a game object, and we also have to tell it that we are accepting game objects, and we also have to tell it, yes, we accept objects from the scene itself. Maybe a little redundant, but it actually makes sense. Unity is not a spring chicken. It's been around for a pretty good while now. And I think since it was originally Mac-centric, can't really call that method until I write it. Since it was originally Mac-centric, you can see some of that hanging over. Still today. But it's kind of like the maximum vertice count. Is based on the maximum size of an integer back in 1995. Some things are hard to get rid of. Where did broadcast name come from? By default, I select everything. And why did I name you MF? That makes no sense. Should be M_MF. Now we can call this. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and write our import function first. So the actual import function that will import the Blender object we're only going to have it over here in the window because we really don't need it anywhere else. In the end, this all should be just about throwaway, in that this code will never go to production. This code prepares for production. That's the last face index that we used, or the last max FI. I just didn't feel like calling it last max FI, or I didn't call it max FI for some reason. A little bit of rambling. So here we are basically combining everything that we are importing into one single object. But our shapes are created from multiple mesh parts. So in the beginning, all of these would be very simple. And overall, it makes life very simple. So since this will be turned into a prefab during development, we won't be serializing it, like I said at first. We need to tell Unity to update the prefab if it's already part of a prefab. And this took me forever to figure out what was going on. Of course, whenever I would mess with the part or mess with the model and re-update it, it wouldn't update my scene. And basically my prefab was not getting updated. Sometimes this will throw an error, but everything's still executed. Prefabs are a little flaky in my opinion, but I like them. Okay, so now we're going to say if our mesh parts are not equal to null, if editor GUI layout dot drop down button new GUI content options. This is how you do a drop down button, drop down menu in Unity. All right. That is beginning to tick me off. Not like I could do anything about it. Go up to Microsoft, I guess, and throw things out the window, and IntelliSense is beginning to suck. Actually, that one probably was my fault. But you hit the tab key and it just doesn't do it. Come to think of it, they both were probably my fault. But oh well. Now, when I'm beginning a vertical group, I want to put a box around it. That's the main reason I'm beginning the group. Alrighty. Let's return to our editor. We need to put our button in here to open up our window. I only want to open this from the editor. And of course we have nothing here. We have no model yet. So let's jump over to Blender. I'm going to go to Shift A in Blender. If you need to, pause me until you get Blender opened. Shift A, I'm going to go to Shift A Circle. I'm going to open this. Be careful when you open it, because if you click wrong, you cannot reopen it. So if I do like that, it doesn't reopen. So Shift A, Circle, click on Add Circle, and right here type 6. And on the rotation X, Y, Z, on the Z, put a 30. With the circle selected, go to, well, first of all, Control N? No, just N. And you will see in the end that it actually says 30 degrees on the rotation. So Control A, all transforms. Now the problem is I made it too big, right off the top of the barrel. So on the scale, I'm going to type in 0.5 on the X and 0.5 on the Y. Do not try to scale it manually. And I'm going to go up to Object, Transform, Align. I'm going to set the relative to 3D cursor. That is your 3D cursor. I am going to set this to positive sides, and then I'm going to select X. Yay! I'm going to click away, reselect it, and then I'm going to reselect the circle. Then I'm going to go back to Align Objects, Transform, Align Objects. And this time I'm going to align the Y the same way. Yay! And there we go. But if you notice, our numbers are all messed up now, so we have to do, with the circle selected, Control A again. No, excuse me. Yeah, Control A. I just accidentally hit Shift A. Control A, all transforms. Now, with the circle selected, hit the Tab key. Up here, select this button right here, the edges, and hit F. Okay, and then hit the Tab key again to leave. With the circle still selected, I'm going to go over to UV Editing. I am going to simply right-click over here and say Unwrap. Why'd you do that to me, Blender? Just kidding, I knew it was going to do it to me. So I'm going to right-click over here with, I'm going to be on top-down view. So wherever view I'm in, wherever I'm in, I'm going to click on the positive Z, or I'm going to hit the number 7 on the keypad, number pad. Not just the number 7 on the keyboard, but the number 7 on the number pad. And now I'm looking straight down. Up here, I need to have this button selected. That means faces are selected. I'm going to right-click, and I now have this Unwrap menu. I'm going to have Project from View. Wow. Just a little bitty now. I'm going to select the Project from View down here, and I'm going to say Scale to Bounds. Not what I wanted. Geez, this is supposed to be simple. So I'm going to jump back over here. I'm going to go back to Shift A, Plane. This time I'm going to make my plane equal to 1. I'm going to go through the same process on the Object Transform Align that I did on the hexagon, on the circle. I'm going to align the Y and the X positive sides. Now I'm going to have the plane and the circle both selected. I'm going to go to UV mode, and once again I am going to Unwrap Project from View. And I'm going to say Scale to Bounds. It did it. Now I'm going back over to Layout. I'm going to get rid of the camera. I'm going to get rid of the light. I'm going to expand circle, and I'm going to call, first of all, I'm going to hit F2 with my mouse over here with the cursor, mouse cursor on top of this window, the Scenes Collection window. I'm going to hit F2 and type in flat top. Copy that. Then here where it says circle.001, or it may just say circle, I'm going to hit F2 again and rename both of them. Very important. I really don't want to delete my plane, but I only want the flat top. So I am going to export this. I tell you what, I'm just going to leave the plane there. I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it from Blender as a Blender file right now. And I'm going to go to Blender, save as, and I'm going to put dev here. This is our dev. Return to Unity. That volume is way too loud. And Unity does import the dev. All I want really is a flat top, but that's okay. I'm going to go to Mesh Parts. First of all, I'm going to add a material here because I don't want it pink. And I'm just going to drag, I guess, white up there because I think I put grass on white. Yeah. I'm going to go back to Models, and with Mesh Parts selected or with the editor window open, I'm going to drag Dev over to Source. Both places, it shows Dev there. I'm going to collect Available. I'm going to deselect Plane. I'm going to go to Options. I'm going to say Import. It's upside down. What's wrong with you? No, it's on the side. I must have been in the side view. And that camera is in my way. Go away, camera. So, I am looking straight down on my Z. Where's my flat top? No, my flat top is... This is something about exporting or importing from Blender in Unity. And as you can tell, I don't do a lot of... I normally export it as a wavefront object. But let's see here. Flat top, plane. And yeah, see, it's rotated both of them. So, oh well, I'm going to go back to Blender, and I'm going to, I'm going to have flat top is the only thing selected. I'm going to go to Export Wavefront Object. Same place. I'm going to select Selection Only, deselect Object Objects, select Object Groups, expand geometry, geometry. Leave Apply Modifiers on, doesn't really matter. Turn off Write Materials and turn on Smoothing Groups. And click Export Object. And now return to our mesh part. We can just drag the new dev on it. Editor window, collect available. There's only the flat top now. Import, there we go. And we have imported our first side. So that does end this first part of it. I know it was almost an hour long, but it gets faster. This was probably the longest class because we had the window in the editor. The mesh parts itself is, what, 121 lines of code. That's a collection of multiple mesh parts. The mesh library is 19 lines of code. The mesh shapes is 58 lines of code. So the rest of this is very short. And the mesh shape is only 29 lines of code. The only other hard part of this whole thing is really the opposites. And it is, well, it's 8 lines of code. for what we're doing right now. It's not going to become difficult till a little bit later on. So opposites are a way that we dictate what shape we're going to use, what part we're going to use when a certain shape is opposite this neighbor. So right now we got the wrong neighbor there. It should be neighbor 6. So it's neighbor 6 is up. So we're saying whenever you're judging yourself, your shape against this shape, I'm the top side. So make your decision based on me because I'm on top. If you're judging your bottom, if you're judging your side 7, neighbor 7, well, I'm neighbor 6. I'm who you're going to judge it against. And if you're none, if you say to none, there are no evaluations made. I hope you got something out of this. I hope I didn't go too fast. I know it was I know it's basically an hour long. But we will get a lot of uses out of this. We're going to make some cool shapes. We're going to make some standard hexagonal looking shapes, with the ridges and with the borders and all that stuff, all that good stuff. I hope to see you in the next lesson. If you got something out of this, subscribe and like. Thank you very much.